Hi, I'm Tyrrell of Uncommon Knowledge, and welcome to How to Use the Meaning Vacuum with your clients. 4 ways to help your client be cool with ambiguity to improve their mental health. Now, sometimes a simple story can contain more truth than 1,000 textbooks. So once upon a time there was a wise old farmer, and one day his prized horse happened to bolt and run away. It just vanished. As evening set in, many of his neighbors came to him to sympathize, saying, "We're so sorry to hear about your runaway horse. It's most unfortunate." But the old farmer just smiled and simply said, "Maybe." The very next day, lo and behold, the horse returned. Not only that, but it brought many young stallions along with it. Now the farmer seemed better off than he had been before. The old farmer's neighbors now came to him and said, "This is a wonderful event. How fortunate you are." But again the man simply said, "Maybe." The following day the farmer's strapping young son tried to break one of the wild stallions in, but it was so wild it bucked violently and threw him to the ground. His leg was broken and his arm was broken too. So now his neighbors immediately said, "Oh no, this is a terrible calamity." But mysteriously, once more, the farmer replied with a philosophical shrug. "Maybe," he said. Now soon a terrible and unjust war began. All the local young men were conscripted to go and fight for their tyrant king. But the farmer's son was rejected from having to serve because of his broken limbs. And in that way he was saved. And so the wheel of life turned. The art of relaxing with not knowing is, I think, more profound than many people realize. Being able to suspend judgment, not being too quick to label something as bad or good, can help us see what there really is to see. It can take the knee-jerkism out of life. I call this skill being able to maintain a meaning vacuum until such time as genuine evidence comes our way to help us make a real, not imagined, judgment about something. A vacuum, and no, I'm not talking about the cleaning device, can be defined as a space devoid of matter. If nature abhors a vacuum, as someone clever once said, so too does emotion. Early mankind was in awe of nature, but what was the meaning of all of that? So creation myths abounded. We felt we had to assign meaning to why the stars were there, why thunder and lightning shook the skies, where we came from, and where one day we'd disappear to. Real science should involve the scientist holding a meaning vacuum with as little prejudice as possible, ideally none, until the true meaning of a phenomenon emerges from actual observation. The inability to be cool with not knowing, to hold a meaning vacuum in the mind, actually maintains lots of emotional problems. Many emotional difficulties, from anger to jealousy, depression and anxiety, emerge when strong emotion has us fill an ambiguous event or situation with imagined meaning. So for example, if our partner is late home from work, an ambiguous situation, we may rush to fill the meaning of that, to assume, "I bet she's having an affair with someone else," which would be jealousy, of course, or "she must have had some terrible accident," which would be anxiety. "She's staying away from me as much as possible because I bring her down," depression. Actually, those kinds of emotional difficulties, are essentially interchangeable. Notice all these statements could as easily be used by someone with a depressive mindset as a jealous or anxious one. The point is, they're all imagined negative assumptions about an ambiguous situation. An interesting study actually found that OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, 2 stems from a difficulty in processing uncertainty. You'll notice the more emotional someone is, the less like our calm farmer they'll be in letting life's evidence present itself to them in its own time, before prematurely filling the vacuum with their own imagined meaning. The more agitated someone's emotions are, the more they'll feel compelled to prematurely fill meaning vacuums with their own make-believe meanings. The opposite of the old adage, "I'll cross that bridge if I come to it." It may in fact be vital for our mental health to develop the capacity to, like our wise farmer, resist prematurely assigning meaning to ambiguous situations or events, to hold a meaning vacuum in the mind so we don't jump to unduly negative or scary conclusions before we know something for sure. So how might we use this concept with our clients? Well, tip 1, describe the meaning vacuum to them to start with. One client, Chloe, had health anxiety and would worry incessantly about all sorts of things. She'd have an ache or pain and immediately know this meant some terrible disease. If she saw an ambulance rushing down the street with sirens blaring, she'd instantly assume that one of her children had been killed. Not just injured, mind you, but killed in some terrible accident. I described how we like to assign meaning to everything, and it was quite a rare person who could simply hold off on assigning meaning and relax with ambiguity, but that it was a skill she could actually learn. So clients always seem to know what you mean when you talk about the meaning vacuum. And for Chloe, just hearing this idea seemed therapeutic. But now we needed to get to the real hub of the skill of maintaining a meaning vacuum. One that I suspect our wise old farmer had in spades, that of being cool and calm. So tip 2, calm the mind so it truly reflects. So if you think about it, agitated water tends to fragment and distort the reflection of the reality around it. The mind is the same. When we're emotionally agitated, the winds of the mind are whipped up, so to speak. But when the water, or mind, is still once more, it simply reflects what it is in the moment, what's happening in the here and now. And that's all. It's clear and truly reflective. I used this analogy with Chloe and it made sense to her. I taught her mindfulness and self-hypnosis. And when she could calm her mind and deal with stress better, she found she could hold her meaning vacuum well and not jump to conclusions. And in fact, she could not just tolerate, but actually relax with ambiguity until such time as actual evidence manifested. In effect, she learned to switch off her imagination and keep cool and calm when she needed to. As an adjunct to the 2 strategies I've just mentioned for helping our clients maintain life-enhancing meaning vacuums, we can also teach them this next approach. So tip 3, generate lots of possibilities, then forget about them. One method we use to help clients develop their capacity for meaning vacuums is to have them get into the habit of generating lots of possible explanations or meanings for some ambiguous event. Then they can simply remind themselves that they just don't know yet. So for example, for someone who's been prone to insecurity in relationships, if their romantic partner hasn't texted them back, they might be tempted to just fill that meaning vacuum with, "I knew it, they're losing interest in me." Instead, they could conjure up all kinds of different possibilities, possible explanations. So maybe they don't have their phone with them right now. Maybe their phone is out of charge. Maybe they're in a meeting. Maybe they're working out at the gym. Ultimately, they can then remind themselves, the fact is, I just don't know. People who aren't yet skilled at allowing meaning vacuums tend to leap to the very first, and often worst, explanation that springs to their mind and stick with it. After a time, Chloe found she could go straight to, "I just don't know, without having to generate lots of possible non-threatening meanings. But if someone feels they have to fill a meaning vacuum before real knowledge enters the equation, we can remind them of an ancient principle. So tip 4, remember Ockham's razor. So William of Ockham, a philosopher from the 14th century, is renowned for his principle known as Ockham's razor. Far from being a cosmetic instrument for facial hair, his razor was actually a psychological one, which asserts that we should not unnecessarily complicate explanations. We can shave off, get it, all the unlikely or more complicated explanations when faced with competing possible explanations for the same phenomenon. The simplest explanation is likely the correct one. We don't need to concoct a conspiracy theory when simple governmental incompetence and stupidity is so ubiquitous. Likewise, if a close relative is late arriving, we don't need to imagine they've been abducted by aliens or caught up in a mass highway shooting. Chances are they've simply held up in traffic. If, after digging in the garden all day yesterday, I suffer a bad back today, this is not probably the first sign of an horrendous spinal tumour. All I need to do is simply recall the hours of unaccustomed digging that I did the day before, and I can confidently put that down as the most likely, least complicated cause. The truth often has an elegance and simplicity to it. So we can help our clients to understand meaning vacuums, relax the perceptual agitations of their mind to be calmer, get good at generating alternative possible reasons for ambiguous events that aren't threatening, and finally remember Ockham's razor. Be more like the wise farmer and less like the assumptive neighbours. I suspect a capacity for meaning vacuums may be a prerequisite for the development of real wisdom, as well as better mental health. I also suspect that an inability to hold a meaning vacuum may block the workings of intuition, and intuition is intrinsic to wisdom. We all have a wise old farmer inside of us. So I hope you found that useful, and if you did, please hit like and subscribe. And if you want to hear when my next video is published, hit the notification bell below this video. I'm Mark Tyrrell of Uncommon Knowledge, and if you'd like to subscribe to my email newsletter, you can find it over at unk.com, that's unk.com/blog. And thanks for watching.